Sim racing with load cell pedals for $700? Something previously kind of unheard of in our market, but now, thanks to Sim Rigs, you can go racing with the SR Titan EVO pedals, load cells underneath the ball of your feet for just $700 in Australia. Hi guys, Chris from Racecraft Simulations here, back for another unboxing and review, this time thanks to simrigs.com. This is the Simrigs Titan EVO pedal set, the 3-pedal set available in Australia for just $700 based on the 3 pedals without the pedal plate. So let's get stuck into it, let's open up this box and see what's inside. Firstly on the box, it's pretty straightforward. Simrigs pedals on the front, that's pretty much all they need to tell you. No frills packaging, no fancy marketing needed, because these things will pretty much sell themselves. Talking about the market they're meant to fit into before we open these things up, when you're trying to spend money on pedals and looking for something to go load cell to get that extra feeling with your driving, everyone talks about wanting to have a load cell brake. It provides that stiff brake feeling with the tunable rubbers that you can really get the feel that you want underfoot and modulate your brake pressure to decrease those lap times and improve the immersion in the car. But what about throttle and clutch? Why not let's go load cell for throttle and clutch as well. Let's get the best feeling possible, and that's available here. So for $700, you can get yourself a set of these SR Titan EVO pedals. We're going to check them out, put them on the home rig at home, try them out for a few days and see how they go. Let's crack them open, and the first thing we just get rid of the foam packing blocks, and inside we see the pedals. Now they offer these as a 3-pedal set. You can get them with or without the optional pedal plate that bolts them all to them, but if you've got yourself something like a racecraft rig, you don't really need the optional pedal plate. So inside, straight away, we have the 3 pedals laid out in the box. Let's crack one open here first, and this looks like a clutch pedal. So it's a simple pressed steel construction, looks very decent, it's just got a nice spring there. What I originally thought when I was talking to Johnny about these pedals was that I would be reviewing a set of pedals that was Hall sensor for the throttle and clutch and then a load cell for the brake, but they're actually 2 little load cells that sit underneath the pedal. So on the pedal actuation, you swivel the pedal there. It's quite actually stiff for a clutch. It's quite decent there. Let me pull that cable out of the way so I don't pinch the cable and ruin them before I can even test them. But it's quite stiff there on the clutch. It's got quite an action. Now, it's obviously very different when you're compressing them with your hands compared to when you're compressing them underneath your foot when they're bolted into the rig. But it's pretty straightforward. It looks like a powder-coated finish on a steel construction. It's cool. They've got the Simrigs logo cut into the pedal faces here. What are we looking at here? We've got a nice little construction. Brass bushings on the main pivot bolt at the bottom of the pedal. You've got a solid linkage with a spring. On the bottom side of the pedal here, it swings through a spring linkage, which is then applying load through these little load cell beams here. It sends the signal out via a small, like a mini Ethernet cable, and that will plug into what I believe originally was intended to be a control box, but is now a one plug on either side of the brake pedal. So that's the clutch. Pretty simple construction. It's got neat fit and finish here. There's no sharp edges, no serious burrs. No frills really. There's not really crazy amounts of adjustments to get yourself lost in. There's a little adjustment slot for the clutch here, so you can make the feel stiffer or softer. You've got a couple of jam nuts on the axle here, so you can move the preload back so you can make them a little bit softer. But it looks like this back cradle can swing as well. So through the arc of the clutch pedal, you get that over-center kind of feeling. But there's no pedal adjustment, there's no height adjustment for the pedal. You've got simple slots for your M5 or M6 mounting hardware in the bottom of the pedal, and you've got simple angle adjustment, so you've got 5 different angle presets to try and get that pedal angle when it's in the rig. As it comes out of the box, it's set back at a good 15 or so degrees on the pedal, and that looks pretty solid. So impressive so far. Let's crack open the next one. We'll crack open the throttle, and the only reason you can tell the throttle and the clutch apart at this rate is slightly different construction at the back, and of course the different pedal plate. The pedal plate's cool here, simrigs.com, cut into the pedal plate. Again, same construction, that nice powder-coated steel, but a different setup for the way the linkage and the spring action is working. So that same turnbuckle, but you have a lot more adjustment on the throttle here. So you run it at the bottom if you want the softest throttle feeling. That's a lot softer on the throttle. That's more like what I was expecting from a throttle pedal. If you want to make it stiffer though, you can move the pivot bolt all the way to the top of the slot, or you could back off these jam nuts in here and unwind the preload on the spring. That'll make the overall setting softer. Until you're trying to pull the pedal all the way back, you might bring it completely too loose, and therefore you're not going to get the feeling you want. Same basic cage construction. It looks like it is the same basic chassis in the bottom of the pedal as we have for the clutch. Brass bushings again, so things can be nice and fluid. Throw a little bit of grease, bit of white lithium grease or lubricant on there, and away you go. It's a nice sturdy pedal plate. 2 bolts holding the pedal plate in as opposed to 1 bolt only for the clutch. I like that engraving and the cutouts on the throttle though. It makes them look unique. You're not going to buy another pedal plate out there that looks like that, so that's cool. And again, that same mini kind of Ethernet cable coming out of the throttle. Now, for the one that everyone wants to focus on, because everyone loves to look at these, and we'll get it out of there eventually, is the brake pedal. So, the brake pedal. Again, it looks like the same... Let me check that out. Same basic chassis on the bottom of the pedal, so they've used the same brackets for all 3 pedals. Keeps modularity high, keeps cost down, and it means that we can deliver a set of pedals to the market for $700 Australian. Really simple construction. I like this. Simple bushings in the bottom of the pedal, no frills chassis for the pedal face, and the main pedal arms here. A nice tiny little load cell. It's actually quite neat in there. Really small load cell in the bottom of the pedal here. I think they're an 80 kilogram load cell that allows you to put up to 180 kilograms of force through the pedal itself. And you can see that's bolted directly on the end to the pickup, and you've got your rubbers and your axle here. So if I try not to fiddle with that wire too much, so this will be an earth wire here. That'll be an earth wire there that we are supposed to attach to something. But if I move these out of the way, try and actuate this, it's a pretty decent amount of resistance already straight out of the box there. So that's pretty cool. You've got the 3 rubbers that I assume you could buy tuning rubbers, or you could put different stiffness rubbers in. A spring for your initial take-up preload there, and then you've got a rubber for when that bottoms out. Before you bottom the spring out, it'll bottom the spacer out in there, and then you're putting all the force through the rubbers only and transferring all that force to the load cell. On the face of it, this is a cool part here, they give you the skinny pedal, so if you stack these up, how they would be laid out on your car, if you were to space the clutch a little bit further away from the brake as you would the throttle, so something a little bit like that. Say you got fat feet, or you got little feet and you want to take up the plate, they give you the extra brake plate in the box, so you can put the fat brake plate on the front of the brake pedal there. So I think that's a really good idea. Again, it's got that same Simrigs logo cut into the pedal plates, which makes them really unique. It's a good feeling brake pedal though, and there's nothing really crazy fancy to them. They're just no frills. They do the job. You can see there's a squishy stop here that looks like it's just taking up any pushback from here. I'd say that's probably the same on all 3 of the pedals. It looks like a little rubber damper that just stops any of the harsh crashing noise of the pedal when it comes back to its free position. It kind of just hits that soft rubber stop and doesn't make a whole bunch of noise and get all wrecked up. So pretty good straight up out of the box. Let's see what else we get in here. Of course, we do get our fat brake plate in the box. We also get our little bag of high quality USB 2.8 cables. So pretty generic bagging and branding here, which, I mean, we always love to see super high quality stuff, but sometimes when you're paying budget prices, you get USB cables that look maybe like they could do a bit of work. This is really kind of early 2000s blue clear covering on the USB cable, but hey, if it transfers data and it's tucked away behind your rig, what does it matter? They give you a spanner to do adjustments with, so that's cool. Plus they give you 2 different Allen keys, so very thoughtful of them here. And these are Jindiao S2 5mm and a 4mm Allen keys. They actually give you ball head Allen keys, so we're going spending a bit of cash premium wise on the Simrig side here. Last one is it says replace for brake, and this is a alternative brake spring. Let me just get these out of the way. And we'll chuck the box to one side. So another one here is what looks like an alternative brake spring. And if I just pull that out of the bag and have a look here. So it does look like, if I push the throttle and the clutch off to one side, it does look like, if we turn this around, see the brake spring on there, it's a much shorter brake spring. So effectively, if you were to run the stop all the way down and you wanted less floating movement, so there's quite a bit of float movement there on the brake pedal that simulates the feeling of the pad take-up distance in the brake system, before then the rubbers simulate the feeling of the actual braking system itself. Any brake system has a little bit of squish in it, even if someone swears to you black and blue that they don't. In top-level race cars, they might feel rock solid, but they do have that little bit of compliance in them, and that's what we're trying to simulate here. But the shorter brake spring allows you to basically take up that extra distance and have the shorter take-up distance, so you can get a stiffer feel earlier on in your brake pedal. So that's cool of them to include that, and they give you the solid washer for the lock-up here. So you're never going to lock this spring up completely and cause the spring any damage, because it should go to full lock-up on the washer itself first. So that's a quick unboxing. Let's go into a little bit more detail for the Simrigs EVO pedals, Titan EVO pedals that is, before we take them home, get them on the rig, and we'll try them out. So for a more in-depth look at the pedals construction, I thought it'd just be easier to get things up close and personal, and we can show these off. As we already said, the same three brackets, or the same brackets for all three pedals, does the base construction with the same slots that you can bolt them down to your rig. A look underneath and we can see the little load cell that is in there, and the few wires that come out to that short little cable. That's really cool. The bushings that the pedal actually pivots on looks to be held in quite nicely with some solid hardware as well. So they shouldn't come loose over time. With the right lubrication, they should have that nice free feeling that they have as they come out of the pocket. If I hold it there and compress it with my hands, it feels quite smooth and quite fluid, even with just whatever grease and lubrication is on them as they come out of the box. I'm going to test them in exactly this form. I'm not going to go trying to pull them apart and lubricate them. I'm just going to get them bolted up, maybe adjust the angle to suit my own rig, and we'll go from there. Inside, we've got two stops here, so it's hard to show, but there is a backstop that sits on this bolt here that looks to be like a rubber hose damper. It's pretty common for these manufacturers to use, especially at this end of the market, to use something 3D printed or something like a heavy-duty rubber hose that just provides itself as a bit of a damper as a backstop. So you don't have that heavy clunk when you get to the back end of the pedal movement. You just get that soft little dunk as you hit it. And then on the back side as well, as the pedal comes back, it's going to hit a stop here, and that's this same piece of hose that sits on this side. So good pedal restriction, good endpoint damping there. It's rudimentary, it's a little bit agricultural, but it does the job. It's kind of what we expect at this end of the market. When we're spending a few $100s on pedals, we're going to get something that just has a potentiometer and doesn't have any load cell movement, so it's a little bit inaccurate, wears out over time, and can generally just not give us the full experience we're looking for. If you want to go to the higher end of the market and go $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 plus into the kind of range where we would go from high-end load cell pedals like the Husingfeld Sprints or even the Ultimates, then into things like the Simtrex, the Raceworks, and even going, $3,500 Australian dollars for the Tiltons, then this is the kind of stuff we don't expect to see on them. But for what we're spending here and what we're getting, we're really paying for the base hardware and the function of it that's going to give us the feeling that we want. So overall, a really cool construction. As you can see here, there's that slot for the stiffness adjustment on the throttle pedal, so you can move it all the way to the top if you want to make that pedal nice and stiff. And then coming out of that, you've just got that little cable that will plug into this side of the brake. So we'll put that one to one side. We'll look at the clutch. Not really much to mention here in the clutch. It is a slightly different back-end cage to the throttle. In fact, it's the same base chassis, but a different main body and a different back end. It's sitting on these little thrust washers, so there shouldn't be any surface friction between the plates causing things to bind up, but the clutch is significantly heavier, and it does have that over-center feeling here, and the back stops are actually in different spots. In fact, they've gotten a bit creative here, and they're not giving us an adjuster, but instead of having two different rubber hose backstops, they've actually just got one. And on the bottom side, it's got the plate that hits it when the pedal's trying to push itself forward, and then on the top side, we've got the plate that hits it when we're trying to push the pedal back. And you can see that's, without holding it down on the bench, it's hard to, but that goes a fair way there. That does go quite a distance. As far as adjustability, we've got angle adjustment, and we've got not much. It's really only maybe about 5mm, and it does actually not even look like it's slotted in there. It does look like it's just a 2-position or even 3-position drilled holes for the spring tension adjustment, so you can make the clutch a little bit stiffer. I would say softer, but it does seem to be in its softest position. So that's a look at the clutch. pretty good. Same basic construction with that same cable that comes out the end and connects it up. We'll go over to the brake. And of course, this is one that everyone wants to look at. First things first, we've got the female receptacle for the plug on. I would assume that this side would take the clutch. It doesn't seem to be labelled. And given that we don't have any in-house software for these pedals, it's just give us the pedals and we'll use Dive View. I don't think you actually need to have one labelled or the other. It's just a channel, and then we set it up when we set our programs up. So the same basic construction as the base chassis that bolts to the rig, all pretty good there. The same bushings and bolting system. There's a bit more bracing in the pedal because obviously being a brake pedal, we put a lot more force through it. So they've thought of that and made sure that they've given us more bracing so that the pedal doesn't have as much flex side to side. I really can't feel any flex here, but we won't really find out any until we get it bolted on the rig. The short load cell there, cute little load cell in the back here. I believe this little one is just for a earth, so we should have to earth this somewhere on the rig, but there's no instructions. There's not any instructions in here, and I haven't been able to find any online, so stay tuned and we'll try and figure out what the go is there. Little control box, this just says control amplifier. It's labelled and barcoded, which tells me it's probably made out of house and then fitted here, but it's cute because it's 3D printed, and we can see the Simrigs logo has actually been included in the 3D printing. So they've thought of those little things of brand recognition, even if it is an OEM manufactured component that then is branded to fit the Simrigs brand. And we've got those little things that just give you that extra feel and gives Simrigs a little bit more recognition for a pedal set. Very good construction. It's really simple. It's just got the same nylon bushing guides for the main axle. It looks like all I would have to do to basically pull these apart would be to try and unbolt that, and that should just come flying off. It might pay to undo the jam nut at the top here and be able to pull that back if I was going to change the rubbers, but there's no rubbers included, so I'm not really sure what we can do with adjustable rubbers at this point. Not really sure whether we really need them or whether there's a market for them at the moment. But the same kind of construction we expect from many different pedals of the similar construction on the market. We've got that spring with a stop in there that simulates the pad take-up, as we already mentioned, and then the rubbers that simulates the brake feel. On the front, we did talk about the replaceable and changeable brake plate. So we've got the different brake plate we can bang on there. It's got the two slots that tab in and bolt it in, so we can get that feeling that we're looking for, go for that wider pedal, and get exactly what we're looking for. The same plug on the other side that will take the throttle sensing, and then you have your USB-B plug on this side that then you can just plug in. So there's no control box needed, which at the moment on my rig, I'm using the SimForge Mark 1 pedals that have the extra control box, the Arduino Leonardo box, and it's a pain in the backside because it keeps falling, and it actually broke the tab off the little Ethernet connector, and so since that tab broke, my clutch has not worked. And I've been driving a 2-pedal setup with a dead man pedal for quite some time. But we're going to bolt these on when we get home, and we're going to try them out. So that's the brake in a nutshell, and I'm really excited to look forward and get these on the rig. So stay tuned. We'll go home, we'll get these bolted up onto the home rig, and we'll try them out here from Racecraft Simulations. This is the Simrigs Titan EVO pedal set, available for just 700 Australian dollars from simrigs.com. So now I've got the Simrigs Titan EVO pedals bolted onto my rig at home and got them all sorted out. It's relatively simple, just a few bolts in each. The bolts didn't come in the box, but I just used the bolts that I had from my existing SimForge Mark 1 pedals that held them into the same pedal plate. 2 leads, one out of the throttle, one out of the clutch. They plug into the ports either side of the brake pedal, and then you run the USB-B from the USB-A cable into your PC, and away you go. Once you're set up on the rig, then it's time for the software calibration. Now, these don't come with their own software like many pedals on the market. They utilize the Dive View software. So it's as simple as going to your internet browser, opening up your browser, search for Dive View, and the first links that are going to come up are either a Hosingveld link, which is fine, or you go to the Leo Bodnar Utilities and Configuration software. You go through the links, download Dive View, unpack the zip file, install the program, and then you're ready to calibrate your pedals. Once you've got it installed, you just go and open up the Dive View program here, and it won't show anything, or it shouldn't really show anything unless you've already had it set up, that is. So you go into Device Settings, and you click on the Simrigs PD. So under here, it's got all the different axes. Now, really, we don't need the hat switch, and we don't need the buffered. So if we turn those off, then I just get 3 sliders. One for throttle. So the throttle is the Z-axis, just because that's the axis I plugged it into. Then my clutch on my left side is the X-axis, and my brake is the Y-axis. What you want to do is, you wouldn't have this pre-selected already, so if you right-click on the panel, click on View Raw Data, then it's going to show up this red line here. If you have it turned off, it doesn't show anything, and it just tells you the percentage of max of which your pedal application is. So then if you click on View Raw Data, then right-click again and go to Calibrate. What you're going to do is you're going to go through and you're going to let the pedal completely rest. So we're calibrating the brake here. So this one here. Check out my fancy feet cam. When you're at rest, it's at 234. Now, I wanted a little bit of dead zone in there, so I put it in at 300. So no matter what I put in, the game's not going to start to recognize any output until I go over 300. So calibrate that at 300, and then what you want to do is you want to max out the brake as hard as you can, as hard as your leg can, not as hard as the pedal can go. There's just a little coinky-dink in this one that as hard as I can max out is actually 4095 or just under 4095 there, and that's starting to strain my leg. The reason you want to do that is you want to get the number to which the pedal is absolutely maxed, and therefore you're putting maximum pressure through the car. Realistically, in iRacing, you never want to be reaching that value anyway, otherwise you're just going to be lock-up central. So you do that calibration, and then you do a little bit of math. You can get your calculator out on your phone, and you take the maximum, take away the minimum, divide that by 2, then add it back onto the minimum again, work out the middle number as what is going to be the center point. So if I want 50%, then it's going to be 2198 according to mine. So if I hold my brake pedal around as close to 2198 as I can, then I'm going to be hanging around that 50% value. And that'll be coming out on this interpolated number here. Not on the raw, but on the interpolated number there. So 50% is around about 2200 or 2198 as we put it into the system. You repeat the process again for the throttle and the clutch. So do the clutch pedal. Do the same here. At rest, I've got it at 1200. At fully compressed, I've got it at 31, so I just brought it back down, and then I found the middle point, and away we go. And then for the throttle, do the same again. At rest, I've got it at 900. At fully maxed, I've got it at 2950, and then found the center point, and away we go. Once you've got that set in dive view, you don't need to look at it again unless you really want to play with calibrations and try and fine-tune those little bits in the brake feel especially. Then it's time to go set it up in your game. Of course, we're going to set it up in iRacing based on what I drive the most of the time. We're going to give this a go in the F3. So let's jump in a test session. It always pays to do this in a test session. And we'll come back and we'll go through the calibration and get our first drive. So when you load into a test session, it's going to tell you to configure controls. So you want to go to that, and it's going to go through the options. Now, it does this to me sometimes where it wants me to configure my steering as well. So I'm just going to go quickly configure my steering. And now it's going to ask us to configure our pedals. So it first asks you for your throttle, so you just apply the throttle down all the way to the top end. Don't try and slam the pedal in as hard as you can go, because then you're never going to reach full throttle. You see the difference that was there before. I go down, and that's gently resting on the throttle stop at 3000 or approx. But if I slam the pedal in as hard as I can, it goes all the way to 3200. Then you're never going to get full throttle while you're racing. So it's better just to go down to the natural feeling stop that you have. Once I've done my throttle, then it's going to ask me to do my brake, and the same again, I'm going to go all the way down with the brake as hard as I can with my leg. The maximum force I can apply through my leg before it almost starts hurting is what you want to be putting down. Then you lift off gently, and you go back to your base raw number, and then you go through the same for the clutch. Again, only go to that natural feeling stop. Don't go slamming the pedal all the way in, because you'll always, or you might never actually have proper clutch function then, and then you'll miss out on that proper feel. It's asking me to do all my other setup as well. They're all my existing settings, so we'll just cycle through those, and then we're good to go. Now it's got all my controls. Now we can jump in and do a test, and let's get out on the track. We're going to jump in. It's the F3. We're at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. I'm just going to set my brake bias. I know what brake bias I want to be running here. And I did set it to no clutch assist, and straight away it stalled the car. So we'll restart the car. Got my starter button here. Crank it over. All right, so we do need... There we go. Now we're underway. For the purpose of giving these pedals a proper test, I turned off all my clutch assists so I wasn't getting any weird feelings or feedbacks from the clutch pedal. Now, obviously the first couple of laps are going to be a little cagey, no matter what car you drive, but especially in the F3, because cold tyre life is the life we like to live in F3. So you get out on the track and just get around, not slowly, but not trying to set the world on fire. Feel things out initially and have a crack at it. Once you get up to speed for a couple of laps, then you come back and try and set some hot laps and get a feel for those brake pedals, get a feel for those settings. If you're finding yourself locking up all the time, then you're going to need to turn up the maximum. And what you can do then is you can go into the joy calib file, separate to the actual calibration, and you can turn that number up higher than what the pedal can actually get to avoid those lockups. Or you can, if you are finding yourself not getting near the lockup range, then you can recalibrate and turn that maximum down so that whatever you're putting through the pedal is right on the edge of the maximum braking performance of the car. That's just a simple calibration thing. It's got nothing to do with these pedals individually. That's just kind of how it's been somewhat established, I'd say. It's how I've learned to set them up in iRacing especially, is regardless of the car, you set each car almost individually, because some cars have a higher tendency to lock up than others. Even with the ABS cars, you want to try and find yourself a baseline number that you work with, because if you're relying on ABS to stop the car all the time, then you're going to be actually losing performance, because then the car is actually making your braking distance slightly longer than it could be if you're right on the threshold. A little bit of ABS usage is okay, and you can tune that with the car setup itself, but if you are relying on the ABS heavily to stop the car in the corners, it means you're putting too much pressure through the pedal, and you're actually making your braking distances longer, therefore making your lap times slower, and you're losing performance by relying on the ABS. So we've got a couple of laps under us now as I almost spit the car off the racetrack. So let's see if we can start to turn up the wick a little bit, get this thing down into the low 12s and high 11s around motorsport seems to be my pace in the fixed setup. A little bit of lock up into the corners is expected with these open wheel cars. It's when you carry the lock up a long way into the corner that it really messes with you here. Hear that, lots of lock up. So again, that's probably me going in a little bit too hard, but now that I've got a feel for it, I'll probably, before I jump into the next session, I'll jump into the iRacing documents folder, and I'll jump over to that, what was it, Y calibration, the brake calibration. It's whatever one's at 4095 anyway. And I'll probably turn that up by 100 points or so, maybe even 50 points. And that'll reduce the tendency of me locking up, especially early in races where you're on those slightly colder tyres. Or you can just try and train yourself and train your muscle memory. But if you find you're always expecting to be able to brake harder, then sometimes it's easier just to go with what you're naturally expecting and turn that threshold up a little bit so that you're braking right on the limit of what the car can do. It's the same as why we tune force feedback individually to suit the driver. There's no one-size-fits-all for force feedback on the wheels. There's no one-size-fits-all for brake pressure and pedal stiffness when it comes to racing simulator, load cell and hydraulic pedals. So there we go. I made it a lot better through that corner then. We've shaved 3.5 tenths of a second off of it. So this lap should be better if I can hang on to it at the end. And I probably won't go recalibrate now. I probably won't go tune that calibration number. I just learn to drive the car as is. just try and get faster as we go with that. And look at that, we're going to go right down to a 12.1, which isn't bad at all. And we're getting faster already at the flying start of this next lap. Motorsport's a good track to test this on, actually. It's got those little bumps and undulation that mean you're gonna find yourself on the edge of braking, and you need to have really good braking control and performance of your car. So far these pedals feel quite good. I naturally drive in boots, if you haven't figured that out from my fancy foot cam yet, purely because it gives me a better feel for what I'm doing and a better simulation, in my opinion. If you're driving in socks, it's okay. I hold nothing against you, but you're going to find yourself nowhere near the threshold of the load cell. So then you're not really utilizing the equipment that you bought properly. I found when I changed from socks to boots, I needed to turn all my brake endpoints up by 20% or more on most cars, and it was quite staggering, as I thought I was really getting the most out of the braking performance when I was driving in just socks. And then when I went to boots, I was like, oh wow, that's a huge difference. And that's really what we're buying load cell pedals for. If you're going to be buying these pedals, it's because you want to upgrade from a potentiometer based or the cheaper load cells that are out there on the market, and you want to go to that load cell brake because you're trying to get faster. And the faster way around the tracks, it's pretty well proven out here in the sim racing world, is through muscle memory, not touch memory. And what I mean by that is, say you're driving in socks, and so you're modulating the brake based on the feedback and the pressure you feel at the base of your foot, the pressure of the pedal pushing on your foot, and you're trying to reach that point every lap to be consistent. But it's physically not possible to be that consistent based on pressure feeling on the base of your foot. Most people are more consistent using the larger muscle groups and using higher amounts of force, and therefore the muscle memory in your whole leg, like your entire leg on that foot, or that's attached to that foot, I guess, attached to that pedal, to modulate the brake pressure and be A, more consistent, and B, get closer to the threshold on a regular basis. Therefore, shorter braking distances, less time spent rolling through the corner, more time spent on throttle, meaning faster lap times, better utilization of the car, and a better experience. The other reason people go to load cell pedals is because they want to emulate that stiff pedal feeling that we know comes with race cars. And if you're driving a street car, it's got a soft old gooey pedal. If you're driving a sports car, it's got a little bit firmer pedal. If you're driving a GT car, it's quite a firm pedal. And if you go to Formula cars, like for example the Formula 3 in real life, would be like pushing against a rock, like trying to move a brick wall. As far as setting up the pedals goes, is that feedback feeling. I've done a little bit of testing the last few days with these pedals, and I initially started them exactly how they were out of the packet, didn't change anything from their as supplied setup with the big spring and the big washer for that pad take-up simulation. And they were okay. I got out there, but I could notice that quite a spongy feeling, and I prefer a much harder pedal. Not quite hard as rock like you can get on some of the hydraulic pedals, but certainly harder than what was available from this pedal out of the box. Certainly harder than what you get on a standard set of like Husenbell Sprints, for example. I'd be immediately upgrading the rubbers to be able to get that stiffer pedal feel. There was no upgradable rubbers in the box for these pedals. What I did do though is I did change out for the shorter brake spring. So that simulates the shorter amount of travel required for that pad take-up, which kind of tricks you into feeling like you have a stiffer pedal, because there's less distance your foot has to travel to be able to engage the brake. And start applying the brakes to the car, and then what I found myself doing was constantly getting down underneath the rig and cranking that preload adjuster screw until it wouldn't go any further. And I actually did fully bottom out that preload adjuster, and that's the best setting I've found on these pedals. If I had aftermarket rubbers for the elastomers to provide that spring feeling in the pedal, I would probably be changing them out for a stiffer rubber as well. But keeping in mind that I've actually maxed out the load cell on these, so if you're looking for a ridiculously hard pedal to get a real simulation of a Formula car, then you might need to look elsewhere that has a higher rated load cell. I think these are only an 80 kilo load cell. Should recheck those specs before we do our final conclusions here. I won't get in the hiccups. But the 80 kilo load cell's good. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're trying to really stomp on the pedal and emulate that Formula car feeling, you might need a little bit more. Oh, gonna run off here. Oh, saved it. So there you go, that's the first drive.
That lap time was 111.9.
111.9, it's not bad.
3 times quick.
So that's a bit of a drive and a setup process for the simrigs.com SR Titan EVO pedals. And I stalled the car because I didn't have auto clutch on. So we'll check in, we'll do some more playing, do some more testing, and then we'll come back and we'll give things a go for a final conclusions for the SR Titan EVO pedals for racecraft simulations. Time for some final thoughts. Stitch has joined me in-house at Racecraft Simulations to give us our final thoughts on the Simrigs EVO pedals. What do you reckon, Stitch? Didn't think you'd have much to say about them. Look, as far as your value for money goes, these are great pedals. $700, and they feel, to me, just as good as what I came from with my Simforge pedals, or as good even as trying out the Huizenveld Sprints in-house here at Racecraft. So for $700 for the budget-mindful sim racer, they are going to be fantastic. For the person who's looking for their first foray into the load cell pedal market, instead of going down the road of the much cheaper things like Thrustmaster TLCMs, or even for the same price, the Fanatec V3 pedal set with the different kind of load cell, these are a fantastic option. But there is a couple of things that you need to be mindful of. While the build quality is very solid, it's very no frills. So you don't have loads of extra adjustment features like you're going to get in some of the pedals that do cost more money. While that may be challenging for some, I actually think it's good, because you don't get lost in the millions of different tuning options that you're trying to think of while you're driving. It's simpler to get started, simple to tune, simple to set up, and there's no other tuning options to try and distract you. There is a very nice touch with including the wide brake pedal plate in the kit as well that allows you to have the fat pedal. I think this should be standard anyway. Having the skinny pedal plate for your brake just doesn't really make sense to me. The driving feel does feel great. No complaints here, although for me, personally, while I drive in boots and I like to drive a lot of open wheelers, the rubbers are a little bit soft. But for most people who are getting into these, they're probably not really looking for that super hard brake pedal feel and trying to drive in boots all the time. So having the standard rubbers available in the kit are pretty good. If we can have some tuning rubbers though, now that would be the next level, to have tuning rubbers where we could go stiffer and to potentially even, on a slider here, have adjustable brake pedal force. So you can put it all the way up on the slider and get a really stiff brake pedal using the same load cell would be absolutely premium. A couple of issues. I had some binding issues with my clutch pedal. It just sounded squeaky and a little bit noisy. You may have noticed it even in the video I recorded earlier on for the first drive. A simple disassembly and reassembly with a little bit of bearing oil and it worked fine, and I didn't really find anything that was causing the binding issue, although later on I did find that these side washers and this nut and bolt that holds this back cradle on for the spring was a little bit tight. Backed those off, a little bit of oil, and I didn't notice any squeaking after that. The little things though, of course, they lack the minor feature, like I said, with brake lever adjustability and things like that, and the fact that in the box there isn't a manual. So unless you're a little bit clued in on how to get things set up with the way you plug them in, simple plug and play into the side of the brake, and using DI view to calibrate the pedals, you could get yourself a little bit lost, especially for the people that these pedals are really marketed at. People who are just getting into using a load cell pedal may not know all the details and the finer things about using DI view, because they probably come from consoles or using a Logitech or an old school Fanatec or even Thrustmaster setups. So having a bit of a manual or at least an instructional video would be incredibly helpful. And since I gave that feedback to the guys at Simrigs, they have said they are working on some of those upgrades. So it's going to be cool to see them come out with the next iteration of the EVOs here, and maybe even give me a set. I'll try them out again. The resolution of the brake load cell is limited to 12-bit, so it was a little bit odd seeing such a small range of brake output, hello Stitch, while I was trying to drive my cars. But to be honest, I didn't actually notice any difference while driving until I went and looked at my VRS telemetry, watching the brake trace and comparing my fast laps from my old pedals, the SimForge Mark 1 pedals, compared to the Simrigs pedals. The lap times, while they were the same, you could see a significant notchiness in the brake trace going around the lap. Not that I noticed it underfoot, and my lap times were the same. It's important to note, after I took these off, I put Simtrex pedals on. I did a few laps, and I did the same lap time as well. So the brake resolution, while it is limited, may not be exactly a big issue. Are they value for money? Absolutely. Do I expect a little bit more though? Things like that blue USB cable that comes with them? Maybe we can change out the USB cable. Maybe we can go just a simple black USB cable and that gets the job done. So if you're looking for a new set of pedals, Stitch is trying to get away because he's sick of me talking about pedals. If you're looking for a new set of pedals, go look at the Simrigs EVOs. These are great pedals, especially if you're in the market for a cheap pedal that feels like a more expensive pedal. If you want Hoisenfeld sprints but don't have the $1,000+ to spend on them, then definitely look the way of these bad boys. $700 gets you in the market, gets you in the game with a great set of pedals that feel absolutely fantastic. You can find more information about these pedals, go to simrigs.com, or even chat to Johnny in-house here at Racecraft Simulations. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I look forward to seeing all your results and going very fast with your brand new pedals. From Racecraft Simulations, we'll see you next time. And from Stitch, he wants a snack.